Well, hello, my friends. Are you ready for some fresh inspiration for the new year? Today I'm going to share with you how I took some Dollar Tree and thrifted items and made them into whimsical and romantic decor. Let's get started. I've got this bucket that I picked up at the thrift store and it has these beautiful rusty handles. I'm going to be leaving those. And I'm also going to use this jumbo craft heart from the Dollar Tree. I want to preserve the rest on there with my Duraclear matte sealer. This will also help me to wipe off any paint I accidentally get on there when I paint my bucket. I have this wood dowel that measures 5/16 in diameter, and I'm going to establish a hole in the bottom of that heart. I'm going to press this in there just to kind of get it started and then dig out some of that styrofoam with a little clay tool until I can get that inserted in there and push it up just about an inch or so, just so it will hold in there securely with glue. Now I'm going to do a coat of Mod Podge on half of the styrofoam on top because I'm going to be laying a piece of cheesecloth over this. I'm going to lay that on there and smooth it out on the half that I have the glue on. And then I will flip back the other portion and apply the Mod Podge and smooth out that cheesecloth on the other half. For a complete list of everything I used in this video today, you can check out the description box below. Once the Mod Podge is dry, I'm going to trim off the excess around the edges, and then I will repeat the same process on the back side of the heart. I do go in and add a little glue right where I cut all that off to try and get those edges to lay down. And for the most part they do, but I did have to go in a little later with some hot glue to get them to lay a little bit flatter. I want to add some texture to the bucket, so I'm using some dry Dex Joint Compound, just using a rubber scraper and a little palette knife to apply this all over the bucket, just kind of working first horizontally and then vertically. I want this to be kind of rugged looking. I don't want a smooth finish, so I want this to almost look like aged and broken up plaster or cement or, I don't know, whatever this bucket could have been made of. So I'm just using the palette knife in the small areas and the scraper in the larger areas. And once that's completely dry, I sand that down just to remove the peaks. I don't want it smooth, I just don't want sharp edges poking up. Now I'm going to take IOD's Cameo mold and their frames mold. I'm going to use my amazing casting resin for the Cameo mold and just pour that in there. I had a little extra, so I just poured another couple of molds there. And for the frames mold, I'm using Das air dry clay. I'm using the two different mediums because I want to be able to squish the resin casting into that frames clay casting. I'm going to push that down in there to get it, that casting of the clay needs to spread out a little bit for that to fit. So this way it just looks like it belongs there a little bit better. So I'm just going to press that in there. And now I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick glue to attach that frame casting to the bucket. I'm going to let that dry and work on my casting here with my little heat tool to get it to where I can bend it to fit into the curve of the frames mold now that it's on the bucket. I just kept heating it and bending it and heating it and bending it until it was a pretty good fit. So I just went ahead and glued that on with my Titebond Quick and Thick glue. So now that the cheesecloth has dried on the heart, I'm going to do the same process with the Mod Podge and a piece of lace. Just doing one half of the heart at a time, letting that set up just a little bit and then folding it back and doing the other side. and I'm doing the front and back of the heart. Now I'm applying a coat of white gesso over that joint compound. This will give me a prime surface to work on with my paints. It's worth noting that the joint compound will absorb the liquids and will break down if it's not sealed. So you're going to either want to seal it before you do the next step, or in my case, I did it after the next step. It just depends on what you're doing. So I'm going to apply this dark brown paint to get some age down in, and I'm going to be really careful about this to not oversaturate that joint compound. And I'm going to brush this on and then wipe it back with a baby wipe. But you just have to be really careful that you don't rub too hard, that you don't get the surface too wet, or it will start to deteriorate the joint compound. And then once I get that all on there, I then seal it so that the next steps of paint won't soak through into that compound as much. And here's where I'm doing that resin casting, and you can see how all that brown is just down into those details, giving it a lot of age. Now I'm going to use my Duraclear matte varnish to seal the entire bucket. And you do want to make sure that the previous paint on there is thoroughly dry before you do this. Now I'm going in with Fusion's Chateau. I'm not doing quite a dry brushing, but I'm doing a very light coat of this so that the brown still shows through. When that first coat was dried, I took a moistened sea sponge and did a second coat, just kind of dabbing here and there, hitting mostly the flat parts of the joint compound. Because again, I don't want to cover up any of the recessed brown shades. And then once I was done with that and waiting for it to dry, I took my dowel rod and gave it a coat of that raw umber, the dark brown paint I used on the bucket. And then I went in with some Oyster Beige, just doing a little kind of brush it on and wipe it off technique. I don't actually know if that's a technique, but that's what I'm calling it. I just use a baby wipe to wipe that back after I've brushed it on there. So now I have this ribbon. I think I got this from Hobby Lobby on clearance. And I'm going to cut out one of these little flowers and then kind of fussy cut around it, removing that mesh backing. I also have this burlap flower, and I got a bag of these from Amazon. I am going to attach that floral ribbon piece to that burlap flower, so it just has more layers to it. Then I'm cutting off the back of a button to make the center of the flower. And I got those little button nippers at Joann's, but I'm sure they're on Amazon as well. And now my heart is all dry, and there were just some areas of that lace that were kind of sticking up at the seams around the edges. So I used my hot glue to smooth those down. I'm cutting out a piece of this ribbon to glue down across the front of my heart, and I'm using Fabri-Tac glue to do this. Now I'm adding another lace ribbon. I love this one. It has little pearls down the center. So I'm going to run my hot glue down the center of that first ribbon and glue that in place. So essentially it's the pearl section that's adhering to the hot glue. This is a ribbon that I picked up from Dollar Tree. I thought this would look really cute around those edges. We're going to cover up those seams with this pretty little ribbon that will be a nice accent to all the kind of fancy schmancy, lacy, pearly. It just kind of, I don't know, to me it just kind of brings it all together. I'm going to snip that off at the bottom, leaving just enough space for that dowel rod to go back in there. Now I'm going to glue that flower on with my hot glue. And then I'm going to take this little piece of ephemera that I think I got from Temu using Fabri-Tac glue. I'm going to tuck that in underneath that lace just a little bit and secure that into place. And now we're back to the bucket. I'm taking light buttermilk, which is a warmer white. I felt like this just needed to be warmed up a little, so I'm going to do that same sponging technique with that color. And then I do have some spots on the rusty handles that I didn't get the paint wiped off soon enough. So I'm using dark brown and a rusty red, just dabbing those colors on to conceal that paint that I got onto the handles. With the painting all done, it was time to go ahead and seal the entire bucket with a coat of my Ultra Matte Sealer. When that was dry, I got my antique gold rub and buff and applied this to that frame and Cameo, just with my finger going around getting all the raised areas to give this lots of nice highlights. I also applied this to the top and bottom rims of the bucket. Now it's time to put the topiary together. I'm using some hot glue in the bottom and applying some floral foam. Just a couple of bricks. These came from Dollar Tree. Just going to stack those on top of each other. And then I'm going to fill in around the edges with this foam. It's like upholstery foam that I picked up from the thrift store. And I just cut it into smaller pieces so that I could kind of build a steady base. I'm going to pre-check where I want that topiary to be. I'm cutting around or tracing around the bucket so that I can cut out a circle that will fit in there on top of that foam. I want a nice clean base to glue my Spanish moss to that will go around my little topiary stem. So I put a hole in the center of that cardboard, gluing that into place. And now I'm going to add lots of hot glue and start adding Spanish moss. I did a nice big chunk of this in there, leaving that center part open for my dowel rod to fit through. And speaking of, I'm going to go ahead and add some hot glue inside that little heart opening and put my dowel rod into place. Now I have a little piece of tea towel that I made into a bow, and I'm hot gluing that onto the bottom of the heart. And then I will add this little antique key. You can get these on Amazon or from Tim Holtz. I'm going to add that onto the center of that with some Fabri-Tac glue. And then I'm taking one of these decorative tacks from Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to put that on that bottom left-hand corner of that little ephemera piece. And now it's time to add the stem of the topiary, putting lots of hot glue in there and pushing that dowel rod into the bucket. I take some more hot glue to fill in that center section. And then I add some little pearls that I have, as if, you know, they've fallen from the heart down onto the base of the little tree. The last thing I do is just tack down the ends of the tails from that bow, just so they stay in place in a position that I like. And that's it. Here's how it turned out. This next one is really simple. I'm just using a mason jar. This one isn't a wide mouth. I think a wide mouth would be easier to work with. But anyway, this is what I used. I'm also going to use some lace, some velvet ribbon trim, that same trim I just used on the previous project, and some floral picks. I'm using my Fabri-Tac glue to just tack down on the bottom and up at the top this lace. It's the same lace I used on the heart, and I just cut it to the approximate size that I needed. I'm going to be trimming it later on. So I'm just adding little bits because I don't want a bunch of glue showing through. So I'm going to continue this around the entire jar. And, you know, up at the top, because it's got that narrow neck, it is going to pucker just a little bit, but that's okay. We're just going to glue that together at the seam at the back. Now I'm going to trim off some of that excess, and I'm going to trim off the excess around the top as well, trying to get it as close to the top of that jar as I can. I'm just going to tack down a little bit more glue there to close that up. And then we're going to add our velvet ribbon. I got this from Amazon. I'm going to use hot glue for this, putting it on that bottom section right where the neck is of the jar before you get to the threaded section. And I started this on the side because that's where I'm going to put my floral. So I wanted the seam on the side. I'm going to wrap this around to where I started, snip off the extra, glue it in place. And now I'm going to add some little tails. I just cut 2 little pieces to glue on there and hang down like the tails of a bow. I'm adding that lace and pearl ribbon on the upper part of the jar neck where the threads are. I'm going to hot glue that around. It just slightly overlaps that pink velvet ribbon. I'm going to wrap it around and then trim off. I just had one little pearl that was in the way for a perfect match, so I trimmed that off, finished hot gluing it, and decided to add a string of pearls to the tails. And now I've got this little flower I want to use, but it needs a center. I don't like that green center in there, so I'm going to hot glue a pearl in there. And now we have a pretty little flower with a pearl center. I'm going to go ahead and attach that with my hot glue. And then I'm just going to add a bunch of extra embellishments that are just little bits and pieces from my different florals. Once you have all your embellishments on there, you can add a tea light or a small candle, and this project is complete and so romantic. Here's how it turned out. Okay, this next one is absolutely my favorite because it's whimsical, it's kind of quirky, it's everything I love about art. I'm starting with this thrifted block. I'm going to use layered chocolate to cover what will be the bottom of my box. I'm going to do a couple of coats on here and then I will need to seal it. DIY paint definitely needs to be sealed. And I'm going to use my Ultra Matte Sealer for that. I have this gorgeous scrapbook paper from Stamperia. It's called Time is an Illusion. And I'm going to use that for this project. I'm going to be cutting this up, not solid pieces for each section of the box, but some of them. So I'm going to start by trimming off some of these irregular pieces that I've already used, because I'm going to piece some pieces together, I'm going to use some full coverage pieces, and I'm going to piece some pieces together over the box to make it more interesting. So I'm just going to make a bunch of cuts with my little handy dandy paper cutter, and then using Mod Podge Mat, I'm going to start decoupaging these onto my box. Now I did cut these as close as I could, but the ones that hang over a little bit, I am going to have to use sandpaper to trim the edges. But just so you know, the scrapbooking paper is a lot thicker and it takes a lot more effort to sandpaper off, so just be aware of that. But I did like using a brayer to help smooth these out. So I did a couple of these that are full sheets, and then I did some like this where I've got pieces that I'm putting together. And this will make more sense as we move along. I purposely wanted these to look put together that way because I'm going to be drawing some lines in there to actually highlight the fact that there's several pieces there. And that's just what makes it more interesting. So with everything glued down and dried, I did have to go in and sandpaper some of the edges off. And I just used my little finger sander for that. When I was done with that, I got out the watercolor pencils. I'm going to use the black one to fill in all those areas, every seam around the entire block, all the corners, tops, sides, and then all those little areas where I pieced those pieces of scrapbook paper together. Just filling all that in with that black pencil. And then the magic happens when we go in with a brush dipped in some water to bring that to life. I love using watercolor pencils on mixed media projects, but you can use paint or a marker, whatever you have. But I look at that. It's just gorgeous. For one of my embellishments on this box, I have this wood heart. I think this came from Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to start with painting it burgundy on this one side. And then I'm blending in two lighter colors of pink. So I'm just blending with the same brush, going back and forth between the colors, adding and blending, kind of doing it in a swirling heart shape. And I'm not cleaning my brush or anything. I'm maybe wiping off the excess paint, but this is kind of like a one fell swoop. Just go for it and blend those colors together until you get the look that you want. I cut out the words Adventures in Wonderland from a book, and I'm applying those to that heart once it was dried with my Fabri-Tac glue. I purposely cut them a little wonky so they weren't all perfect. And now I'm taking that same black watercolor pencil, going around the edges of the heart, and then I will go around the edges of my script that I put on there. Now I will do the same thing I did on the box and take my little paintbrush, dip it in water, and bring that black pencil to life. Another piece of ephemera I want to add to this box is this sticker from Temu. I found that if you put some scotch tape on the front, you can peel off that backing really easily. And I'm using Fabri-Tac glue to glue that down because I don't trust just the sticky back. I want to make sure it's on there permanently. I also have these paper dolls from Tim Holtz and this little frame that was from Temu. I want these to fit into the frame, so I'm going to trace around there and cut off the bottom of them so they fit into that frame the way I want. I'm going to dress up that frame a little bit with my Distress Oxide Vintage Photo, just going around this with my little sponge stopper and my brush to get into all those little nooks and crannies to give this a more vintage feel. I'm going to do the same thing with these two little snippets, a postcard and a special delivery sign, going around the edges with that vintage photo. I have this little ruler piece of ephemera that I want to use. So I'm just going to bend it at the bottom there so I know where to cut it off. And then I can glue that in place with my Fabri-Tac glue. I think that came from Temu as well. So now it's time to go ahead and glue down our little happy couple and the frame. I'm gluing down everything that's flat first. Then I have some corner pieces to add, so I won't do the thicker pieces until after the corner pieces have been added to the box. Then I add the postcard and the special delivery, little piece of ephemera. And now on the other side of the box, I'm going to add another piece of ruler. This one was actually a sticker, so it's more transparent, and it's kind of a pink color. I'm adding that on the bottom. And then I'm adding another one of those vintage post stamps from Temu, just above that. And this one's kind of transparent so you can see what's underneath coming through. Now these are the corner protectors I want to add. So these go at the top of the box. I'm going to put them on there, line them up and make a little mark so I know where to put my nails in. But I wanted to drill a little pilot hole first so it gives me something to stick that nail into before I hammer it down. Using the needle nose pliers was really helpful to get that started because those nails are really tiny. I got these off of Amazon and I'm really happy with them. The link will be in the description box. I'm going to go ahead and glue down my little heart now with some Titebond quick and thick glue. And then I have a couple of numbers that came from a pack from Dollar Tree. I'm going to give those the same paint job I did that heart. And then I'm going to do the same outline with that black watercolor pencil. Now here I have a little pink satin ribbon that I tied into a bow. I'm going to glue that on there, and then this little piece of baby's breath. I'm mimicking the one next to it on the right hand side that has that in the image. Those numbers are done, and I'm going to glue those onto the front. Then I have this heart from Amazon that I painted previously for another project. I don't remember what I did to it, but it's like pinks and purples and whatnot. I'm going to glue that on there and then start adding some little paper flowers. For the top, I have this glass knob, but it has a chrome base that doesn't go with my project. So I'm going to take some Spanish copper rub and buff. I'm going to brush that on there the best I can and then buff that off and then go in with the antique gold rub and buff that back, and then add the Spanish copper again. And in the end, I end up doing some black wax as well, just to make sure this has some age to it and fits with my project. Now these are the feet I'm going to add. I got these from Amazon. They're super cute. So I'm going to add these to the bottom of the box, taking my pencil and making a mark where I need to drill a little hole. Now this box, I'm sure the wood is very thin. I don't want to drill all the way through, or there would just be nothing there for the screws to bite to. So I'm basically just doing like a little pilot hole. And I put the foot back on there and checked with my screw or my drill just to make sure that I was getting it in the right spot, because I have a real knack for screwing this kind of stuff up, but they turned out great. So here's where I'm going to do the black wax. I'm going to brush that on and kind of let it dry a little bit and then buff that back. And then I can attach that to the top of the box with some E6000. I scruffed up the bottom of that first with some sandpaper so I would get better adhesion. I'm going to make sure that's centered, put some weight on it, and let it dry a good 24 hours. And here's how it turned out. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you find my content useful and will like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. But more importantly, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. By the way, if you'd like to see other Valentine related videos, just click on the link at the end of this video, and I hope you get inspired by those as well. See you next time.